Next on Currents News, a lot more U.S. troops could soon be mobilized to confront the caravans heading to the U.S.-Mexico border. Google employees walk out. They say they're fed up with the way the company handles cases of sexual harassment. The trade war between the U.S. and China is heating up, and everyone from consumers to manufacturers and even farmers may soon feel the pinch. Plus, Catholic literature has changed the course of human history, but what about today? We have the answers right now on the news. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. President Trump is about to make a major move as migrant caravans continue the march to the U.S. southern border. Mary Maloney reports on why the commander-in-chief is considering new action.
And they got a lot of rough people in those caravans. They are not angels.
Speaking to reporters Wednesday evening before a rally in Florida, President Trump says in addition to the some 5,000 U.S. troops already headed to the southern border to contain migrants headed for the U.S., he's considering increasing that number to as many as 15,000.
As far as the caravan is concerned, our military is out. We have about 5,008. We'll go up to anywhere between 10 and 15,000 military personnel on top of Border Patrol, ICE, and everybody else at the border.
A former Marine and Homeland Security spokesman for the Trump administration tweeted Wednesday, the U.S. doesn't need its military to defend against a group of unarmed migrants, including many women and kids. And when Defense Secretary James Mattis was questioned if troop deployment to the border was a political stunt, he said,
the support that we provide to the Secretary for Homeland Security is practical support based on the request from the Commissioner of Customs and Border Police. And so we don't do stunts in this department. Thank you.
All U.S. troops will also join more than 2,000 National Guardsmen already at the border who are mobilized to stop Central American migrants from reaching U.S. soil. I'm Mary Maloney reporting.
As the Central American migrants continue their walk to the United States, Catholic agencies along the border with Mexico are ramping up their preparations to aid the refugees. They say that if the immigrants are released from ICE custody, Catholic charities will provide them with food, clothing, and shelter. Total immigration to the United States has tied an all-time record, according to a new report. The arrivals include people arriving in the states both legally and illegally. Census Bureau data was calculated by the Center for Immigration Studies. They found that 1.75 million immigrants came here in 2016, and that matches the total in 1999. Latin America has the most immigrants to the United States, with nearly 670,000 people. Another major story that's still unfolding tonight. The U.S. trade war with China is intensifying, and the average American may feel it in their pockets. Consumers, manufacturers, and farmers are all in the crosshairs, and Omar Jimenez reports the latest.
The world's two biggest economies locked in a trade war with no substantial progress toward an end from either side. The latest move coming this week as the U.S. restricts software and technology exports to a state-backed Chinese company, citing security interests.
The fact is, we have to start taking care of our own country, because we were taking care of other countries and we were letting our country go to hell in trade and in so many other ways.
But the president acknowledging the two sides are speaking, tweeting, "Just had a long and very good conversation with President Xi Jinping of China. We talked about many subjects with a heavy emphasis on trade." Meanwhile, the total of more than $360 billion worth of tariffs from both sides are starting to have real effects on Americans, with several thousand U.S. goods affected. Among them, soybeans.
It's a matter of concern when your largest soybean export customer is having negotiations with your government.
In September, the U.S. Department of Agriculture made $4.7 billion of aid available to farmers, but it hasn't quite been enough. The National Milk Producers Federation claims dairy producers have lost more than $1 billion in revenue since May because of tariffs imposed by China and Mexico, and warns that, quote, significant income losses will continue as long as these tariffs remain in place. In Washington, Omar Jimenez, Currents News.
The suspected anti-Semite accused of massacring Jews says he's not guilty. Robert Bowers entered that plea in federal court today. He's been charged with killing 11 worshipers at Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue last Saturday. Yesterday, in his first court appearance, a grand jury indicted Bowers on 44 federal criminal counts. He's facing the death penalty. Google employees around the world got up and left their offices today. The workers are fed up at how their bosses have dealt with sexual harassment complaints. According to news reports, Google management protected several execs accused of sexual misconduct. Workers allege that they also gave those executives big payouts as part of severance packages.
We're walking out in support of those who've been harassed anywhere in the workplace, and to ensure that perpetrators are not rewarded and are not protected.
Google says the company takes sexual harassment seriously and investigates complaints. There's a new battlefront to protect the sanctity of life tonight. Earlier this year, the traditionally Catholic country of Ireland voted overwhelmingly to legalize abortion. Now there's an intense campaign to do the same in Northern Ireland. The Irish pro-life movement is fighting back. Leaders are calling the dangers to human life in Ireland, the North, and Great Britain the biggest threat to the unborn in a generation. Today is All Saints' Day, and Pope Francis is urging Christians to seek holiness. During the weekly midday Angelus prayer, the Holy Father asked the faithful to follow the path of the Beatitudes without half measures in everyday life. As the crowds gathered in front of St. Peter's Square, the Pope said All Saints' Day is a family feast day because the saints are our truest brothers and sisters. Tomorrow is All Souls' Day, where we remember the faithfully departed. Pope Francis will be celebrating Mass, but not inside of a church. Sean Richardson has that report.
On November the 2nd, the Pope will celebrate Mass at 4 p.m. in Rome's third largest cemetery, the Laurentino, south of the city. Pope Francis will stop to pray in part of the cemetery called the Garden of Angels. It is a 600 square meter area where are buried unborn babies. This will be the fourth cemetery visited by the Pope in the Italian capital. Previously, the Pope has visited the Verano and Prima Porta, as well as the American cemetery of Nettuno in 2017. At the American cemetery, he visited the soldiers and nurses who died during the Second World War.
Gli uomini fanno del tutto per dichiarare e fare una guerra e alla fine distruggono se stessi.
On Saturday in St. Peter's Basilica, the Pope will also celebrate Mass for cardinals and bishops who have died in the past year. In Rome, Sean Richardson, Currents News.
The final countdown is underway tonight. We are less than a week away from the midterm elections, and unlike most, there's a unique buzz around this election day. John Lawrence has more.
Candidates across the country are heading toward the final stretch before the 2018 midterm elections.
One thing you do is next Tuesday is vote.
And there's an unusual excitement in the air. More than 24 youth activist groups have scheduled a national walkout Tuesday. The goal is to get more people out to vote. And it's not just students making that push. President Trump is stumping in a number of states over the next few days, including Montana, Tennessee, and Ohio.
I think that the president's the best messenger for the party. He's had an incredible, historic first 2 years in office, and he has a great story to tell.
One of the most closely watched races is in Texas. Republican incumbent Ted Cruz is battling for his seat in the Senate against Democratic Congressman Beto O'Rourke. A lot of eyes are on the gubernatorial contest in Georgia between Republican Brian Kemp and Democrat Stacey Abrams. Members of the White House, including Vice President Pence, are campaigning for Kemp. Abrams has the backing of former Presidents Obama and Carter, as well as Oprah Winfrey. Meanwhile, in Wisconsin, incumbent GOP Governor Scott Walker is neck and neck with Democratic challenger Tony Evers.
This last week may be a game of inches, maybe millimeters, to who gets the advantage.
Which means every vote counts. John Lawrence, Currents News.
There's a lot more news headed your way. It's a heartbreaking sight in Venice. A look inside St. Mark's Basilica, where floodwaters have caused so much damage. Then, have books about faith lost their appeal? I'll dig into that topic with a Brooklyn priest who's an international expert. Plus, the latest twist in an airline catastrophe that killed nearly 200 passengers. Why was the plane allowed to fly after what happened the night before? And do you have an interesting story idea or something happening in your parish we should know about? Don't keep it a secret. Contact us with the details at newstips@desalesmedia.org. Your contributions matter. We'll be right back. Pope Francis says the Bible is the most powerful book ever written and that it has transformed countless lives. He's encouraging the American Bible Society to promote the good book.
Vi auguro di accogliere sempre la Bibbia nella sua unicità preziosa, come parola che impregnata di Spirito Santo, datore di vita, ci comunica Gesù, che è la vita, e così rende feconde le nostre vite.
The American Bible Society has been working to get the Bible into the hands of people for 200 years. But what about other faith-based literature? Can just any Catholic novel stand the test of time? To find some of those answers, Currents News' Tim Harfman reports from Pauling Books and Media in Midtown Manhattan.
For Sister Neville Christine Forchap and her religious order, the Daughters of St. Paul, Catholic literature is an essential part of their mission.
We sell the Bibles, the Word of God.
Sister Neville is the manager at Manhattan's Pauline Books and Media Store on East 29th Street between Park and Lexington Avenues. She says she knows Catholic literature is alive and well because the faithful are always looking for new ways to grow closer to God.
As long as there's that deep seeking for Christ, there'll always be the thriving of Catholic literature, which is the relaying of the faith from generation to generation through the media.
The Order's publishing company, Pauline Books and Media, prints about 40 new titles a year, distributing thousands of copies to nearly a dozen stores across the country. The bookstore receives new shipments every week. Shelves are stocked with books in English and Spanish, ranging from children's themes to biographies of saints. Peter Vera enjoys reading Catholic literature and just started working at the store this week.
When you read a lot of Catholic literature, sometimes you stumble upon a sentence that you're just like, wow, that's powerful. That's a great message. And then when you see that message, you want to give that same message to somebody else.
Samantha Smith is a frequent customer. She travels from her home in Queens to the Manhattan bookstore multiple times a week and says Catholic literature is a key component to everyday life.
Because there's so many kind of nooks and crannies to the faith life now that literature is really almost all-encompassing when you think of how it can develop the faith more deeply.
But Peter admits people like Samantha are becoming harder to find.
There are people who are falling off and not wanting to read a lot of them more and to get more, knowledge on our faith. And it's pretty sad.
But these sisters are keeping the faith that readers will continue to get closer to their Savior, one chapter at a time. In Manhattan, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Father Robert Lauder has an international reputation as a literary and film critic. He's also a professor of philosophy at St. John's University and the host of Net TV's The Catholic Novel, and he joins us now. Father Lauder, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Liz.
I love all my interviews, but I have really been looking forward to this.
Thank
we
you.
just saw Tim's package, the beautiful bookstore, the line of books. How did you first get into Catholic novels?
Well, I was a senior at Xavier High School in Manhattan, and the Jesuit teaching English had us all read Graham Greene's Brighton Rock. It was a Catholic crime thriller, and I didn't know anything like that even existed.
Wow.
So that hooked me, and I've stayed hooked for many years.
And having said that, what makes it a Catholic novel? You said you didn't even know that those existed.
Right. My definition is this: a Catholic novel is one whose theme is based on some Catholic dogma, moral teaching, sacramental principle, liturgical principle, and the mystery of Catholicism is treated favorably. So like James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man is filled with Catholic symbols, but the church is not, the mystery of the church is not treated well.
I love the way your face lights up as you talk about these books. Have you noticed a rise or a decline in the demand for these wonderful books?
The bad news is a serious decline.
Really?
Yes. I've tried to get Catholic high schools and Catholic colleges to put into their curriculum a course on the Catholic novel, and I've really interested no one to do that. I think they think it's too parochial, and of course it's the exact opposite. The Catholic novels deal with the most important issues. So I have kind of a one-man apostolate, trying to get...
Well, hopefully after this interview, you'll be able to rally more troops behind you, because it's so worth it. Let's talk about some of the Catholic books that are considered classics, that is. We have the Confessions of St. Augustine by the saint of the same name. We have The Imitation of Christ by Thomas Kempis, Summa Theologica by St. Thomas. What is it about these books that have stood the test of time?
Well, to put it very simply, I think they're insights into the mystery of God, and they're insights into the mystery of human person. That's it, basically. And you can return to those books over and over again. As a matter of fact, a course I've been teaching for 20 years, this coming semester in the spring, I'm going to put St. Augustine in there.
Oh, well, we have to now talk about your top 5 Catholic books then. That's a great segue. What should the faithful at home be reading?
Okay, the Catholic novels I think they should be reading would be Brideshead Revisited, which is a classic. I think it's the best drama that has ever been put on television. I met Jeremy Irons once, and
I love him.
I said, thank you for Brideshead Revisited, and he said, did we get the religion right? And I said, you did. He said, we worked very, very hard on doing it right.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. The screenwriter was an agnostic, the guy that wrote the screenplay, but he got it right.
He got it right.
So that's one.
Another?
My favorite Catholic novel is The End of the Affair by Graham Greene. The main character in this novel is God. He's on almost every page. So this is my favorite.
Okay.
Then another one by Graham Greene, which I think is the best novel on the priesthood, The Power and the Glory. It was made into a good film with John Ford directed it, Henry Fonda starred in it, but it had almost nothing to do with the novel, because the novel is about a priest who has fathered an illegitimate child and is a quote-unquote whiskey priest. But Greene is such a genius. From that, he draws out the mystery of the priesthood.
Okay.
Number 4, I would say, is Mariette in Ecstasy. I'm going to encourage you to read this one.
Okay.
It's about a 17-year-old girl in a very strict convent, and she begins having the stigmata. And the question is it authentic? Is she a fake? Or is she crazy? And I'm going to tell you, on page 10, you'll say it's a fake. On page 20, you'll say it's authentic.
So it keeps you engaged throughout the whole thing.
Sentence of the book. Can you believe that? To the last sentence. And I gave it to a sister. She said it was wonderful, and then I said, what did it mean? And she gave it the wrong interpretation, and she's a nun.
Oh, wow.
And then she reread it, and she said I was right. And then the last one is Deep River.
Okay.
By Shisako Endo, and he's the one who did Silence. And this is, I think Deep River refers to God.
And we're talking about the timeliness and the compelling nature of all these books that just remain just so substantive and relevant.
Right. Liz, nobody I've ever recommended any of these books to has come back to me and said, I didn't like it.
All right.
So it's really a treasure hidden in a field. It's a shame.
Oh, I love the way you put that. Thank you so much, Father Lauder. I could talk to you forever. You'll have to come back and talk to us some more.
Okay,
Thank you for being with us.
Just invite me.
I absolutely will. You're invited. It's on record. You can hear Father Lauder talk more about Catholic literature during the new season of his net TV series, The Catholic Novel. The 4th season premieres Tuesday, November 27th at 9 p.m. In other news tonight, flooding in Venice has damaged one of the most well-known basilicas in the world. Crews have been working hard to clean up St. Mark's Basilica after record-breaking rain. The water coming in like waves inundated the church. Nearly 3 feet of water completely flooded the baptistry and left its 1,000-year-old mosaic floors waterlogged. So far, Italy's recent violent storms have killed at least 11 people. Asia Bibi, a Christian woman once convicted of blasphemy, is leaving Pakistan soon. That's according to family who say Bibi is unsafe in the country. The Pakistani court acquitted Bibi of all charges Wednesday. Her family says the threat of danger is so high, Bibi has no other option but to leave. They're not saying where Bibi's headed. Investigators say they're closer to finding the black box of the passenger plane that went down in Indonesia. Meanwhile, there are mounting questions about the safety of the aircraft. Passengers on the same plane the night before the crash say they had quite the scare. Ivan Watson reports from the scene in Jakarta.
This is what's left of Lion Air Flight 610. Shoes and backpacks, fished out of the sea. Arranged for relatives of the 189 passengers and crew who were on board when the plane crashed. Epi Samsul Umar spots his 24-year-old son Mohammed's black sneaker, a heartbreaking moment of closure. Indonesian authorities say they've detected what they suspect is the underwater locator beacon for the flight data recorder, which they hope will yield information about why this brand new plane crashed into the ocean just minutes after takeoff. More than 40 ships and helicopters have been combing the Java Sea, searching for debris and the remains of victims. They're also trying to home in on the sound of the black box's beacon.
I hear the ping locator from the black box, like ding, ding, every 1 second, I think.
Authorities dispatched divers and a remote-operated submersible to depths of up to 35 meters or 100 feet. But the search complicated by conditions underwater. Data recorded by Flight Radar 24, a program that tracks commercial flights, shows Lion Air Flight 610's altitude and speed, measured here in blue and yellow, fluctuated wildly for 13 minutes until the plane smashed into the ocean.
There was something going on in that cockpit, or something that they were battling against in the autopilot system.
The night before the brand new Boeing 737's final doomed flight, the same plane flew from Bali to Jakarta. Flight data shows early in that journey, the plane plunged nearly 1,000 feet in just 30 seconds. It was a moment that panicked passengers.
Just like you were in the normal condition, and suddenly there is a big hole, a really deep hole, and you just go down. I scream. Everybody scream, and then I just pray to God.
Investigators are looking at reports that an instrument malfunctioned on the plane the night before it made its final disastrous journey. With the mystery of what happened to Lion Air Flight 610 still unanswered, distraught families of the victims have been left sifting through the rubble.
That was Ivan Watson reporting from Jakarta, Indonesia. Late word tonight, divers have found the black box. Still to come on Currents News, he's a national tennis champion who proves that age is nothing more than a number. And remember the picture of that young girl who was mesmerized by the portrait of Michelle Obama? Well, she's back. The story's next. A man in North Carolina has set out to prove that age is really just a number. 92-year-old Tio Campanelli has been playing tennis for decades, and he's still winning national championships and takes to the courts daily, showing off his forehand and collecting trophies. Tio has defied the odds by winning the 90s and above national championship twice.
They seem to respect the age that I've been able to achieve this at, and that gives me a sense of pride and honor.
He didn't lose a set, and the tournament director said that as far as individuals 90 years and above, he'd never seen anybody serve like Tio.
Tio is living proof that it's never too late to find your sport. Finally tonight, an example of life imitating art. You might recall this image of little Parker Curry as she stood mesmerized, staring up at a now iconic portrait of Michelle Obama hanging in the National Portrait Gallery. Well, that photograph, which went viral, inspired fashion stylist Alicia Welsh to design a matching dress for Parker. She wore the custom-made outfit as her Halloween costume and even posed like her idol. Fitting attire for the little girl who charmed the world because, as her mother put it, her daughter believes Michelle Obama is a queen and she wants to be a queen as well. That, by the way, is a quote from little Parker. And that is Currents News. I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you so much for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. And I hope to see you again next time.